Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the dark side of the U.S. election campaign.
Obama and his wife, I'm concerned that they could be anti-white.
Al Jazeera, under the microscope for its reporting.
Hate and fear are still powerful forces in American society.
Hollywood and spin, the marketing men and the World Wide Web. YouTube tries to clean up its comments page by creating an instant echo chamber.
I'm clearly a moron.
And the internet's pet project. Welcome back. We've done more than 100 editions of The Listening Post, and this week, for just the second time, we're going to report on an Al Jazeera story. This channel made waves in the U.S. this past week when it aired a report on the presidential election campaign from a Republican rally in Ohio. Many of the interviewees made racist and anti-Muslim comments when asked about the Democratic candidate, Barack Obama. Like so much contemporary journalism, the report ended up on the internet, where it found a big audience and eventually came under criticism. Al Jazeera was accused of selective reporting. That's our starting point this week. Al Jazeera, racism in the U.S. election campaign, and whether the American mainstream media are reporting that story.
A small town in the swing state of Ohio is where Sarah Palin addresses some of her core supporters. The assignment was really simple. There was one mission, just to go and get right in the rally, talk to the supporters, and hear their views on Barack Obama. This area is mostly white and working class, and here's what some have to say about presidential candidate Barack Obama.
I'm afraid if he wins, the black will take over. It's not a Christian. This is a Christian nation.
We asked a simple question to break the ice: why are you here? They would talk about Sarah Palin. The second question would be, what do you think about Barack Obama?
He seems like a sheep, or a wolf in sheep's clothing, to be honest with you. And I believe Palin, she's filled with the Holy Spirit, and I believe she's going to bring honesty and integrity to the White House.
He must support terrorists, you know.
Obama and his wife, I'm concerned that they could be anti-white, that he might hide that.
Just the whole the Muslim thing and everything.
If anything, I wasn't shocked that they were thinking those things, but I was shocked that they were so willing to express them, even without digging for them that much.
Al Jazeera is not carried by any major cable system in the U.S., so this story made no impact there when it was broadcast.
Baby killer. Call it what you want. It's baby.
That happened only when it was posted on the net. It attracted well over 1.5 million hits on YouTube and generated more than 10,000 comments. I can't believe it takes foreign news agencies to talk about the elephant in the room, said one, referring to racism. Why was this not shown on CNN or Fox, asked another.
I have not seen reports in the U.S. mainstream media like the Al Jazeera story, and the only reason I can think of as to why not is because I don't think the U.S. mainstream media really wants to actually see this in their own country, so they really don't want to ask the question.
A few weeks ago, blogger Tim Russo did some similar reporting to Al Jazeera's, going to another Republican rally in Ohio and sampling some of the opinions there. He posted them on his site.
I just want to know if you think he's a terrorist. Do you think he's a terrorist?
I think he's a one-man terrorist cell.
When I went to a McCain-Palin rally, I pressed record on my camera, and these people started talking to me in the manner that you see on the videos and in the manner that you see in the Al Jazeera video.
You think Barack Obama's a terrorist?
I think he's a communist and a Marxist.
Wait, I want to see what you got.
It is not hard to do. You talk to them, they will say this.
He's a terrorist?
He's got the bloodlines.
What does that mean?
Just think about it. Look at the name.
It's limited only by the amount of battery power in your video camera.
Do you think he's a terrorist?
I think he could be.
The reason that bloggers are paying attention to the racism at McCain-Palin rallies is because the mainstream media is not.
As you may know, there have been some nasty comments directed at Barack Obama by some people attending McCain rallies. The New York Times and other Obama media supporters are more shocked than Claude Rains was in Casablanca and are directly blaming McCain. Unbelievable.
I'm paying attention to it as a blogger because I believe it needs to have a light shown on it so that it stops. If you don't shine a light on it, if mainstream media is not reporting it, someone has to report it, and that's why bloggers are doing so.
It's not that the U.S. mainstream media don't discuss racism in the election campaign. They do.
Without question, race is going to be part of the conversation. Race baiting doesn't have to be, and yet it is happening in this campaign.
But they tend to report it at a distance, in a sanitized way.
I mean, they've been unwilling to address it head on, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that racism is still a deeply uncomfortable subject, and it's usually spoken about in code, and that's for fear of offending anyone. The mainstream media is not in the business of offending anyone. They're under far too heavy commercial pressures to risk losing any audience.
The fact that Casey Kaufman's story was on Al Jazeera provoked a second strand of media commentary on YouTube. One writer described the piece as Al Jazeera propaganda BS. Another called it a typical Al Jazeera hit piece. A third said, Al Jazeera is not on your side, boys and girls. Be very afraid of Obama. Some defended the network. Al Jazeera is just an international news agency, said the writer. Why not show these stories when others won't? The media debate continued on the pages of the Washington Post. Colbert King, an African-American, wrote a column on the issue. In it, he acknowledged the camera didn't lie, but asked, was this fodder served up by Al Jazeera to feed anti-American sentiment overseas? To be sure. Al Jazeera's managing director, Tony Berman, responded with a letter to the Post, calling the column nonsense, saying that Al Jazeera's piece explored an important aspect of a story which is largely being ignored in America's docile mainstream media. It took a while, but the Washington Post did eventually publish Berman's letter.
The initial reaction to Casey's piece was a reaction to the message, and there was sort of a shock and awe at the unmediated expressions of intolerance and racism that really is only usually alluded to.
It's a reminder that hate and fear are still powerful forces in American society.
All of a sudden, attention was focused on the messenger. There was this assumption that Casey's piece was part of some sort of agenda. If placed in the entirety of our coverage of this campaign, there's no way on earth that a piece in isolation could represent some kind of agenda.
What you don't know from the edit is that it was surprisingly easy to get the sound bites that you heard in the video. We didn't spend all day talking to 300 people and do some boiled down edit just of the most kind of confrontational and hyped up comments. It was pretty straightforward.
Even though Al Jazeera is not on the air in most of the U.S., policymakers there understand the channel has an impact elsewhere. Former Secretary of State Colin Powell made that clear when he was asked about racism in the election campaign.
Those kinds of images going out on Al Jazeera are killing us around the world. And we have got to say to the world, doesn't make any difference who you are or what you are. If you're an American, you're an American.
Powell's message was broadcast by the U.S. news networks, whose viewers might have wondered what, specifically, he was talking about, unless they went online, where they would have seen a somewhat different picture of small-town Ohio than what Americans see on their TV screens.
Casey Kaufman, Al Jazeera, in Eastern Ohio.
Here's how our Global Village Voices see the story of Al Jazeera's report from Ohio.
So what can I say? I think it's good that Al Jazeera is bringing this to the forefront. At least there is a media outlet that is discussing these things, and if you can't get it on mainstream media, at least you can get it on the internet.
If they were to make, for example, some sort of coverage on this issue in Ohio, where these voters were saying a lot of racist things, all of a sudden they could be labeled as being pro-Obama, or they're trying to bring down McCain. And ultimately, for the mainstream media, if they keep it like it's a horse race, then they, increase viewership. You increase viewership, then you increase how much you sell your advertisements for. It's just really that simple.
Barack Obama has chosen not to make race an issue in this campaign, and the mainstream media has followed his lead. Because the sad truth of the matter is that for Barack Obama to achieve the presidency, it will prove to be the thickness of his skin that is more important than its color.
If you have issues with the way the media report the news, stop yelling at your television set, start talking to your webcam. Email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net and we'll find a way to get you on the air as one of our Global Village Voices. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. A court in Morocco has convicted 47 people and handed out sentences of up to 30 years for the suicide bombing last year of an internet cafe in Casablanca. Police say that the suspects had formed a terror group and were planning to carry out a string of attacks in the city using homemade explosives. The charges included forming a criminal gang with the aim of committing terrorist acts and failure to denounce terrorism. The Moroccans using the internet cafe at the time of the attack can consider themselves lucky. Only 3 people were injured in the explosion which killed the bomber. There are mixed media reform messages coming out of China these days. The government has announced that all visitors to internet cafes in Beijing will be required to have their photographs taken. The new rules say that by mid-December, all net cafes in the capital must install cameras to record the identities of their customers, who must be 18 or over. There are more than 250 million internet users in China, and the government is leery of the political and social networking potential of new media. In a second announcement, the state news agency Xinhua reported that the greater freedom that foreign journalists were granted prior to the Beijing Olympics will be extended and is to become standard practice. That means that foreign but not Chinese journalists can continue to conduct interviews without applying to the authorities for permission. There's an investigation underway in France into the possible poisoning of the lawyer representing the family of the murdered Russian journalist Anna Politkovskaya. Karina Moskalenko, who lives in Strasbourg, is recovering after becoming sick just as the trial opened in Russia of the 3 men accused of being involved in the Politkovskaya killing. A judge in Moscow rejected a request to postpone the preliminary hearing because of the lawyer's condition. French police are looking into the discovery of mercury in Moskalenko's car. The incident took place almost exactly 2 years after Miss Politkovskaya, whose reporting was constantly critical of the Kremlin, was killed. The media campaigning group Reporters Without Borders has condemned the Palestinian Authority for hounding a cameraman who works for the Hamas-backed channel Al-Aqsa TV. The organization says that Osaid Armane was arrested in September after being summoned by Palestinian Authority intelligence services, which are controlled by Fatah on the West Bank. Armane was released without charge, but says that he was forced to sign a promise to stop working for Al-Aqsa TV or risk being returned to prison. Reporters Without Borders says that Armane has been jailed 3 times in the last year for working for media owned by Hamas. Google, the great innovator, has a new invention that some people are calling the YouTube moron filter. Google says it's trying to improve the quality of discussion on its video sharing site and thinks that allowing people to listen to their comments before they post them might help.
I'm clearly a moron.
YouTube's comments page is littered with inane and often profane comments about posted videos. One software developer has already created a feature called YouTube Comment Snob, which simply filters out undesirable comments on the site by searching for poor spelling, profanity, and even excessive punctuation. Will YouTube's new filter, which reads back your comments to you, actually discourage the authors of lowbrow material from sharing their thoughts with us? Probably not, but it's worth a try. We're back after the break with a story on Hollywood's powerful publicity machine and how it's coming to a website near you.